Hi, my name is Dr. Stephen L. Jones. I am the teaching and training pastor at Kingsland Baptist Church and the Greek instructor at Lanier Theological Library.
Dr. Steve Jones. Steve, good to see you here at the library, and welcome to Exegetically Speaking.
Why, thank you. It's good to be here.
Yeah, you have been teaching Greek now for quite a number of years, haven't you?
Yeah, been at it for, counting out about 15 or 20, it seems like.
And in all fairness, you and I taught together at Houston Baptist University.
Yep.
And tell us how you got started reading Greek.
Well, I felt called to ministry. I was a freshman in college. I was at Baylor University, felt called to ministry, and a mentor of mine told me that, he encouraged me not to be a religious studies major because it would teach me all that stuff in seminary, but I knew I wanted to read the New Testament, and I knew that seminaries required Greek, and so I enrolled in Greek. As a sophomore, I took Greek. I thought it was New Testament Greek. Turned out it was classical Greek, and ended up falling in love with it and really enjoying what I got to know.
So the connection between classical Greek and New Testament Greek, is it a straight line? Is it a jagged line? What kind of line is it?
The best way to understand it would be, classical Greek is Greek spoken by Greek speakers, whereas New Testament Greek is Greek used and spoken and written by people who weren't native Greek speakers. So like koine, the word koine just means common, and so it was the common tongue. The most analogous thing we have today is maybe French in West Africa or English in a lot of parts of the world, not by native speakers, but used as a communication over a bridge over a lot of different cultures.
So if you can read classical Greek, can you read New Testament Greek?
Yes. If you can do classical Greek, you can read New Testament. If you can read New Testament Greek, you can read a lot of classical Greek, but there's a handful of things a very small number of things on the fringe that maybe you might not be comfortable with in the grammar. And then the grammar just gets a little bit more complex as native English speakers speak a more complex level of English than people do in like a marketplace in a.
And beyond college, you continued to work in Greek and other languages as well, because you teach Latin as well.
Yeah, so at the end of college, I realized, still feeling called to ministry, I was going to have to pay for seminary, or I got a scholarship to go to graduate school, secular graduate school, to study ancient languages, Greek and Latin. I had to decide in undergrad whether I wanted to do Hebrew or Latin. And I've studied Hebrew, but really what I wanted to study was the first centuries AD and BC, the world in which the New Testament emerged. Mm-hmm. And so Latin kind of bought me more. It got me more access to the kinds of stuff in both the Roman culture, but also in later early church by being able to read Latin. Yeah,
and Latin was the language of the church for lots and lots of centuries, wasn't it?
Exactly right.
Well, today we're going to be reading in Greek and New Testament Greek in Acts chapter 17, but we're going to be in kind of a classical city, aren't we? We're going to be in the city of Athens.
Exactly. We're going to be in Acts chapter 17 with Paul's sermon on the Mars Hill on the Areopagus. And there's a passage in Acts 17 where he's gone there, his heart stirred up, he's waiting for his colleagues to arrive in Athens, and he's walking around the city seeing all this idolatry, and he's looking for an opening. He's already gone to the synagogue like Paul always does, and he's arguing with people in the synagogues, and he's just trying to look for an opening to talk about the gospel to all these learned people and all these people from an outside of a Jewish context. And that's when he sees the altar to an unknown God. And that gives him the opportunity. He gets drug up to Mars Hill and gets to present his famous sermon.
Yeah, and it is a famous sermon. One of the things I tell students is that part of Paul's missionary strategy is to develop common ground, whether he's in the synagogue or if he's in Mars Hill. Yeah. He's going to look for something in common with the people to whom he speaks.
Exactly right. And what's cool about this passage is most people know that he quotes their philosophers. In chapter 17, verse 28, he says, "For we are all his children, even as one of your poets said." Like he's quoting, this was a philosopher poet named Aratus, who wrote this work called The Phenomena, which was an allegorical poem about the nature of the universe. And so he's saying, your guys found some truth. Your philosophers found some truth. And let me show you how that we have common ground to talk about some stuff too.
All right, so what's the verse we're going to be focusing in upon?
Well, we're going to be looking at the verse right before that, Acts 17, verse 27.
All right.
So this is, he's talking about, I saw this altar to an unknown God. And he's trying to say, look, we know that's not who God is. God, the God who made heaven and earth, doesn't dwell in temples made with hands. In fact, he made you. He made every nation and all these things. And then finally, he says in verse 26, he says, he made from one man every nation of mankind to live on the face of the earth, having determined their appointed time and the boundaries of their habitation. And then verse 27, that they would seek God, if perhaps they might grope for him and find him, though he is not far from each one of us. And the grope for him is the really interesting thing. It's one of my favorite Greek verbs. I love showing people this. The Greek word is selaphao. The actual form that happens in the text is selapheseon.
Yeah.
But it's selaphao, and it's translated accurately grope. But it means so much more than that. If you have a little bit of the classical context, it gets really cool.
Okay. And what is that background that we need to have to see this?
Well, one of those coincidences, people always ask, how do you get the deeper meaning of the text? And for me, this passage was revealed to me just by almost accidentally. I was teaching a summer reading class when I was at the University of Texas, and we happened to be reading Homer's Odyssey. At the same time, in my own personal Bible study, I was reading through Acts in Greek. And I happened to get to Acts 17 and Odyssey 9 at the same exact time. And selaphao is the same Greek word that gets used in Odyssey Book 9 to describe the encounter Odysseus has in the Cyclops cave. So a little backstory. Odysseus is traveling around trying to get home after the Trojan War, and he stops on the Cyclops cave, and the Cyclops traps Odysseus' men in the cave and starts killing them, and they are trying to figure out how to get out. And one of the things the Cyclops they do is they get the Cyclops to go to sleep, and they blind him. They poke his eye out. But the Cyclops gets to the edge of the cave. They're still trapped in the cave. And and Odysseus hides his men underneath all of the Cyclops' sheep. And as the sheep go out every day, this blind Cyclops at the mouth of the cave is feeling all the sheep as they go out, trying to see if it's just sheep or if it's Odysseus' men trying to sneak out. And the word it says, it doesn't say just grabs for, it uses the Greek word selaphao. So he was groping.
Groping like a blind man.
Yeah. And so when Paul uses this phrase, when he says, God made you that you might seek out for him and grope for him, it doesn't just mean search for him. The picture really is like groping in the dark like a blind man. And so that's what Paul is saying. He's saying God made you to seek after him, but because of sin, your seeker is broken. And so what you worship in ignorance, let me declare to you. What's cool is there's an interesting middle biblical ground. This selaphao word also gets used in the Greek translation of the Old Testament, the Septuagint, in Genesis 27, when Isaac is trying to bless Esau and Jacob comes and steals the blessing.
Oh, yes.
In the Greek translation, it says that Jacob comes up and he feels like that Isaac selaphaos his arm, that he gropes his arm like a blind man, and he says, you feel like Esau, but you sound like Jacob. Yeah. And so again, the picture is not just grab a hold of.
Right.
It means searching like a blind man in the dark to grab a hold of something that you don't know where it is.
Like groping in the darkness.
Yeah.
That's a really great reading of that text.
Yeah.
Dr. Steve Jones, thanks for being with us today on Exegetically Speaking. If you learned too much today and your head is hurting, there is one sure cure. That is to share this podcast with a friend. If you've never visited Wheaton College, I hope you'll make plans to do so. We have a wonderful campus all year round. And if biblical languages are your fancy, check out the MA and the BA program at Wheaton College. You can go to wheaton.edu, look for modern and classical languages. Get started today. This is the day you want to do it, right? If you have questions or comments, if you just want to be in touch, please email us at exegetically.speaking@wheaton.edu. That's exegetically.speaking@wheaton.edu. Thanks to all those who make this podcast possible. You know who you are. Until next time, thanks for listening.